The Cold War. A global struggle for dominance. The Cold War, lasting from approximately 1947 to 1991, was a period of intense rivalry and tension between two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This geopolitical struggle, while not resulting in direct military conflict between the two nations, influenced global politics, economics, military strategies, and culture. The Cold War was marked by ideological clashes, espionage, propaganda, and proxy wars. We will explore the origins, major events, and consequences of the Cold War, highlighting its enduring impact on the world. The seeds of the Cold War were sown during the Second World War. Despite being allies against Nazi Germany, the United States and the Soviet Union had fundamentally different ideologies and visions for the post-war world. The United States championed capitalism and democratic governance, while the Soviet Union promoted communism and a centrally planned economy. These opposing views created a foundation of mistrust and competition. The Yalta and Potsdam conferences in 1945, where Allied leaders met to discuss the reorganization of post-war Europe, further highlighted these ideological differences. Disagreements over the future of Germany, Eastern Europe, and the spread of communism fueled suspicions. The Soviet Union's establishment of communist governments in Eastern Europe, often referred to as the Iron Curtain by Winston Churchill, deepened the divide. The early Cold War period was characterized by the establishment of opposing blocs and the first major confrontations. In 1947, the United States adopted the Truman Doctrine, pledging to support countries resisting communism. This policy was soon followed by the Marshall Plan, which provided economic aid to help rebuild Western European economies, thereby preventing the spread of communism. The Berlin Blockade, 1948 to 1949, was one of the first major crises of the Cold War. The Soviet Union blocked all land routes to West Berlin, attempting to force the Western Allies out of the city. In response, the United States and its allies organized the Berlin Airlift, supplying the city by air for almost a year until the blockade was lifted. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was the first hot conflict of the Cold War. North Korea, supported by China and the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea, which was backed by United Nations forces led by the United States. The war ended in a stalemate, with Korea remaining divided at the 38th parallel, but it demonstrated the willingness of both superpowers to engage in proxy wars. During this period, the arms race intensified. Both the United States and the Soviet Union developed nuclear weapons, leading to a policy of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The Soviet Union's attempt to place nuclear missiles in Cuba was met with a U.S. naval blockade and intense negotiations, ultimately resulting in the missile's removal. The period of détente in the 1970s saw a temporary easing of Cold War tensions. The signing of the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT, agreements and the Helsinki Accords were attempts to reduce the risk of nuclear war and improve relations. However, this period of relative calm was disrupted by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, which rekindled Cold War hostilities. The election of Ronald Reagan as U.S. President in 1980 marked a renewed assertiveness in American foreign policy. Reagan's administration increased defense spending, supported anti-communist movements worldwide, and deployed the Strategic Defense Initiative, the SDI, a missile defense system. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union faced economic stagnation and internal dissent. The accession of Mikhail Gorbachev as Soviet leader in 1985 brought significant changes. Gorbachev introduced policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, restructuring, aiming to reform the Soviet system. These policies, along with the withdrawal from Afghanistan and improved relations with the West, paved the way for the Cold War's end. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of communist control in Eastern Europe. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, marking the definitive end of the Cold War. The Cold War had profound and lasting effects on global politics, economics, and society. The division of Europe and the establishment of military alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact defined geopolitical alignments for decades. The arms race led to significant advancements in technology and military capabilities, but also heightened the risk of nuclear conflict. The Cold War also spurred the space race, leading to remarkable achievements such as the moon landing in 1969. The ideological struggle influenced cultural and intellectual life, with propaganda, literature, film, and education reflecting the themes of the era. The end of the Cold War reshaped the international order. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, while former Soviet states transitioned to varying degrees of democracy and market economies. However, the legacy of the Cold War, including regional conflicts and nuclear proliferation, continues to affect global security and politics. The Cold War was a complex and multifaceted period of the 20th century, marked by ideological rivalry, political maneuvering, and the ever-present threat of nuclear war. Its origins in the aftermath of the Second World War, its key events, and its profound consequences have left an indelible mark on the modern world. Understanding the Cold War is essential to grasp the dynamics of contemporary international relations, and the enduring impact of this pivotal era in history. In the following chapters, we will cover the space age, from launching satellites to walking on the moon, as well as the turbulent events that shaped the 1960s and beyond. The Treaty of Rome, a cornerstone of European integration. The Treaty of Rome, signed on March 25, 1957, is one of the most significant treaties in the history of European integration. This landmark agreement laid the foundation for the European Economic Community, the EEC, and the European Atomic Energy Community, or Euratom, marking a crucial step toward the creation of the European Union, the EU, as we know it today. The treaty aimed to foster economic cooperation, improve stability, and promote peace among the participating nations. Its impact and provisions have shaped the course of European history, influencing policies, economies, and the political landscape of the continent. The roots of the Treaty of Rome can be traced back to the aftermath of the Second World War, a period marked by widespread devastation and a strong desire for peace and economic recovery in Europe. The war had left Europe in ruins, and there was a pressing need to rebuild economies and prevent future conflicts. The idea of European integration was seen as a way to achieve these goals. In 1951, the Treaty of Paris was signed, creating the European Coal and Steel Community, the ECSC. This treaty aimed to pool the coal and steel resources of France and West Germany, making war between these two nations not only undesirable but also materially impossible. The success of the ECSC paved the way for further integration, leading to the negotiations that culminated in the Treaty of Rome. The Treaty of Rome contained several key provisions that were instrumental in shaping the future of Europe. Among the most notable was the customs union and common market. The treaty proposed the progressive reduction of customs duties and the establishment of a customs union. It aimed to create a common market for goods, labor, services, and capital among the member states. This integration was designed to boost economic growth and enhance cooperation. The treaty laid the groundwork for several common policies, including the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, and the Common Transport Policy. These policies aimed to coordinate agricultural and transport sectors across member states, ensuring fair competition and efficient resource use. The treaty established the European Social Fund, the ESF, which was designed to improve employment opportunities and promote social cohesion within the member states. It also established the European Commission, a key institution responsible for proposing legislation, implementing decisions, and upholding the EU treaties. The Commission was tasked with ensuring that the objectives of the treaty were met, and that integration proceeded smoothly. Alongside the EEC, the treaty also established Euratom, which aimed to coordinate the member states' research programs for the peaceful use of nuclear energy. This initiative sought to ensure energy security and foster technological advancement. The Treaty of Rome marked a significant milestone in the process of European integration. By establishing the EEC and Euratom, the treaty set the stage for the creation of a single European market, and the eventual formation of the EU. The customs union and common market facilitated increased trade and economic cooperation among member states, leading to sustained economic growth and prosperity. One of the treaty's most important legacies is the establishment of the European Court of Justice, the ECJ. Under Article 177, the ECJ was given the authority to adjudicate cases referred by national courts, ensuring uniform interpretation and application of European law. This judicial mechanism has been crucial in maintaining legal coherence across the EU and protecting the rights of its citizens. Despite its achievements, the Treaty of Rome also faced challenges and criticisms. Historian Tony Judt noted that the treaty was initially more of a declaration of intent rather than a comprehensive plan for integration. Many of its provisions were frameworks for future regulations and policies, which required further negotiation and implementation. Nonetheless, the treaty's vision and framework proved immensely important in the subsequent decades. The Treaty of Rome has been amended several times to adapt to changing circumstances, and to deepen European integration. Notable amendments include the Maastricht Treaty of 1992, which established the European Union, and introduced the concept of European citizenship. This treaty also set the stage for the creation of the euro, the EU's common currency. In 2009, the Treaty of Lisbon further reformed the EU's institutional structure and decision-making processes. This treaty renamed the Treaty of Rome as the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, reflecting its evolved role and scope in the contemporary EU framework. The Treaty of Rome stands as a cornerstone of European integration, setting in motion a process that has profoundly transformed the continent. Its provisions for a customs union, common market, and common policies laid the foundation for economic cooperation and political stability. The treaty's legacy is evident in the European Union's continued efforts to promote peace, prosperity, and unity among its member states. As Europe continues to face new challenges and opportunities, the principles and frameworks established by the Treaty of Rome remain central to its ongoing journey toward greater integration and cooperation. Ambitions, execution, and consequences. The Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward, initiated by the People's Republic of China under the leadership of Mao Zedong, represents one of the most ambitious yet tragic episodes in modern history. We will examine the multifaceted dimensions of the Great Leap Forward, exploring its origins, objectives, execution, and the severe consequences that ensued. Launched in 1958, the Great Leap Forward was an audacious economic and social campaign, aimed at rapidly transforming China from an agrarian society into a socialist society through rapid industrialization and collectivization. Mao Zedong's vision was to surpass the United Kingdom and eventually the United States in industrial output within a short span of 15 years. This radical shift was driven by the belief that mass mobilization of labor could compensate for the lack of industrial capital and technology. The initial phase of the Great Leap Forward focused on massive infrastructure projects, including the construction of waterworks on the North China Plain during the winter of 1957 to 1958, and the establishment of people's communes and rudimentary rural industries. These communes were intended to be self-sufficient units, integrating agricultural and industrial production and communal living. The Great Leap Forward commenced during the period of China's Second Five-Year Plan, 1958 to 1963, though the campaign itself was discontinued by 1961 due to its catastrophic failures. Mao introduced the Great Leap Forward at a meeting in Nanjing in January 1958. The plan was characterized by highly ambitious production targets and unrealistic expectations of agricultural and industrial output. The policies implemented under this campaign included the establishment of backyard steel furnaces, where peasants were encouraged to produce steel in their backyards using scrap metal and other available materials. This move was aimed at accelerating industrial growth but ultimately led to widespread inefficiencies and a significant misallocation of resources. The consequences of the Great Leap Forward were devastating and far-reaching. The diversion of labor from agriculture to industrial projects, combined with flawed agricultural policies and adverse weather conditions, led to a catastrophic decline in food production. The resulting food shortages triggered one of the deadliest famines in human history, with estimates of deaths ranging from 15 to 45 million people. The famine was exacerbated by the inefficiencies and mismanagement inherent in the collectivization process. The communal kitchens, which were supposed to provide food for the entire commune, often ran out of supplies, leaving many without sufficient nourishment. The combination of poor planning, lack of agricultural expertise, and forced labor contributed significantly to the disaster. The social and political ramifications were equally profound. The famine led to widespread resistance and discontent among the population, which in turn affected the government's control over rural areas. The economic collapse prompted significant policy shifts and a re-evaluation of economic strategies in subsequent decades. Rural education suffered due to the upheaval, and while women were initially mobilized into the workforce, the ensuing chaos often negated these advances. The Great Leap Forward is often cited as a cautionary tale of the dangers of overzealous and ideologically driven policy implementation without adequate planning and consideration of practical realities. The campaign's failure necessitated significant policy shifts, leading to a more pragmatic approach in China's economic reforms in the years that followed. The legacy of the Great Leap Forward remains a somber reminder of the human cost of political and economic experimentation on such a grand scale. It underscores the importance of balancing ambitious goals with realistic planning, and the need for flexibility and adaptability in policy implementation. In conclusion, the Great Leap Forward was an ambitious but ultimately disastrous attempt to catapult China into a new era of industrial and social development. The severe consequences of the campaign highlight the critical importance of careful planning, realistic goal setting, and the consideration of practical realities in the pursuit of national development objectives. A turning point in French politics. The May 1958 crisis. The May 1958 crisis in France, a pivotal moment in the nation's history, marked the collapse of the Fourth Republic and the rise of Charles de Gaulle, leading to the establishment of the Fifth Republic. The origins of the May 1958 crisis can be traced to the complexities of the Algerian War, which had begun in 1954. The conflict in Algeria, a French colony, was a major strain on the Fourth Republic. The war polarized French society, creating deep divisions between those who supported Algerian independence and those who were determined to maintain French control over the colony. The inability of successive French governments to resolve the conflict, and the increasing violence in Algeria exacerbated the political instability in France. By 1958, the Fourth Republic was characterized by frequent changes in government and a lack of strong leadership, which undermined its ability to effectively govern. The situation in Algeria further highlighted the weaknesses of the Republic, as the military, feeling unsupported by the civilian government, became increasingly restive. This dissatisfaction within the military ranks was a critical factor that contributed to the crisis. The immediate trigger of the May 1958 crisis was the perceived threat of a military coup. On May 13, 1958, a group of French settlers and army officers in Algiers seized control of government buildings, demanding a change in policy and the formation of a government that would maintain French Algeria. This coup in Algiers was led by General Jacques Mousseau and supported by other prominent military figures, including General Raoul Sullan. The coup in Algiers created a sense of urgency and crisis in mainland France. The government of the Fourth Republic, led by Prime Minister Pierre Flamelin, struggled to respond effectively. The threat of a military intervention in mainland France loomed large, and the possibility of a civil war became a real concern. Amidst the turmoil, Charles de Gaulle emerged as a unifying figure capable of restoring order. De Gaulle, a hero of the Second World War and a staunch nationalist, had distanced himself from the political scene after resigning in 1946. However, his reputation and the desperate need for strong leadership made him the natural choice for many French citizens and political leaders. On May 29, 1958, President René Coty appealed to de Gaulle to form a government, stating that he was the most illustrious of Frenchmen, and that only he could lead the nation through the crisis. De Gaulle agreed, on the condition that he be granted extraordinary powers to draft a new constitution. This marked the end of the Fourth Republic and set the stage for the Fifth Republic. On June 1, 1958, Charles de Gaulle was appointed Prime Minister with full powers to draft a new constitution. The drafting process involved a significant overhaul of the political system, aiming to create a more stable and effective government. The new constitution, which was approved by a referendum on September 28, 1958, established the Fifth Republic. The Fifth Republic introduced a strong executive branch, with a powerful presidency and a more stable parliamentary system. De Gaulle became the first president of the Fifth Republic, assuming office on January 8, 1959. The new constitution provided the president with significant powers, including the ability to dissolve the National Assembly and call for new elections, as well as the authority to appoint the prime minister. The May 1958 crisis and the subsequent establishment of the Fifth Republic had profound and lasting impacts on French politics. The new political system brought greater stability and continuity to the French government, which had been lacking under the Fourth Republic. Charles de Gaulle's leadership during the transition period helped to restore confidence in the French state and its institutions. The resolution of the Algerian War, which ended with the Evian Accords in 1962, further solidified the Fifth Republic. The war had been a major source of instability and division, and its resolution allowed France to move forward and focus on other pressing issues, both domestic and international. The Fifth Republic has endured for over 6 decades, demonstrating the resilience and adaptability of the political system established in the wake of the May 1958 crisis. The crisis itself is remembered as a turning point that reshaped French politics and governance, highlighting the importance of strong leadership and effective constitutional frameworks in times of national turmoil. The May 1958 crisis in France was a decisive moment in the nation's history, leading to the fall of the Fourth Republic and the rise of the Fifth Republic under Charles de Gaulle. The crisis underscored the deep divisions and challenges faced by France, particularly in relation to the Algerian War, and highlighted the weaknesses of the existing political system. The establishment of the Fifth Republic brought much-needed stability and strong leadership, allowing France to navigate through the crisis and emerge as a more resilient and unified nation. One giant leap. The formation of NASA. The establishment of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, in 1958 marked a significant milestone in the history of space exploration and aeronautical research. NASA's creation was driven by a combination of scientific ambition, geopolitical competition, and technological advancement. In the mid-20th century, the Cold War competition between the United States and the Soviet Union extended into the realm of space exploration, particularly after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite, on October 4, 1957. Sputnik's success not only demonstrated Soviet technological prowess but also raised concerns about national security and technological leadership in the United States. Prior to NASA's creation, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, established in 1915, was the primary U.S. agency responsible for aeronautical research. However, NACA's scope was limited to aeronautics, and it lacked the mandate to conduct space research. The launch of Sputnik underscored the need for a dedicated space agency that could coordinate and advance the United States' efforts in space exploration. The formation of NASA was a direct response to the growing demand for a robust space program. On July 29, 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act into law, officially establishing NASA. This landmark legislation outlined NASA's objectives, which included expanding human knowledge of space and the atmosphere, improving the usefulness and performance of aeronautical and space vehicles, and fostering international cooperation in space activities. NASA began operations on October 1, 1958, absorbing NACA and its resources, which included 8,000 employees and 3 major research laboratories. This transition provided NASA with a solid foundation in aeronautical research, upon which it could build its space exploration capabilities. Additionally, NASA inherited several key projects and assets, such as the Naval Research Laboratory's Project Vanguard, the Army's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, and the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, which included Wernher von Braun's team of rocket scientists. One of NASA's first major undertakings was Project Mercury, which aimed to send a human into orbit and return them safely to Earth. This ambitious project faced numerous technical and logistical challenges, including the development of reliable rockets, life support systems, and re-entry procedures. Despite these obstacles, NASA achieved its goal on February 20, 1962, when astronaut John Glenn orbited the Earth aboard the Friendship 7 spacecraft. In addition to Project Mercury, NASA also focused on developing scientific satellites and space probes. One of the early successes in this area was the Explorer series of satellites, which provided valuable data on the Earth's magnetic field, radiation belts, and other phenomena. These early achievements laid the groundwork for future scientific and exploratory missions, including the Apollo program, which aimed to land humans on the Moon. NASA's organizational structure evolved rapidly to accommodate its expanding mission. The agency established several research centers and facilities across the United States, each specializing in different aspects of aeronautics and space exploration. Notable centers included the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the Johnson Space Center in Texas, and the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. As NASA grew, it also fostered partnerships with academic institutions, private industry, and international space agencies. These collaborations were essential for advancing technology, conducting scientific research, and sharing the benefits of space exploration with the broader community. The formation of NASA in 1958 was a pivotal moment in the history of space exploration. Driven by the geopolitical pressures of the Cold War and the desire for technological leadership, the United States established NASA to coordinate and advance its efforts in space. From its early projects like Project Mercury to its expansive organizational growth, NASA quickly became a symbol of American ingenuity and ambition. The agency's creation not only marked the beginning of a new era in space exploration, but also set the stage for some of humanity's most remarkable achievements in the decades to come. A complex intersection of politics and religion. The 1958 Lebanon Crisis. The Lebanon Crisis was a significant event in the history of Lebanon, characterized by political and religious tensions that culminated in a U.S. military intervention. This crisis, lasting from July to October 1958, was a pivotal moment that reflected the broader geopolitical struggles of the Cold War era, and the internal divisions within Lebanon. The roots of the 1958 Lebanon crisis can be traced to the complex sectarian and political landscape of Lebanon. Lebanon's population was divided among various religious communities, primarily Christians, Sunni Muslims, and Shia Muslims. The political system, established by the National Pact of 1943, aimed to balance power among these groups but often led to tensions and conflicts. The immediate cause of the 1958 crisis was President Camille Chamoun's attempt to secure a second term, which was seen as a breach of the National Pact. Chamoun's pro-Western policies and his support for the Eisenhower Doctrine, which aimed to contain Soviet influence in the Middle East, further alienated the Muslim population, who largely supported Arab nationalism, and were sympathetic to Egyptian President Jamal Abdel Nasser's pan-Arab ideology. The political tensions in Lebanon were exacerbated by religious divisions. The Christian community, which included Maronites and Greek Orthodox Christians, generally supported Chamoun and his pro-Western stance. In contrast, the Muslim community, including Sunni and Shia Muslims, felt marginalized and were more inclined towards Nasser's vision of Arab unity and independence from Western influence. These tensions led to widespread unrest and violence. Protests and demonstrations erupted, and armed clashes broke out between pro-government forces and opposition groups. The situation deteriorated into a state of near civil war, with Beirut and other parts of the country witnessing severe violence. In response to the escalating crisis, President Chamoun requested military assistance from the United States, invoking the Eisenhower Doctrine. The U.S. administration, concerned about the potential spread of Soviet influence in the Middle East, decided to intervene. On July 15, 1958, American forces landed in Beirut, marking the first significant U.S. military intervention in the Middle East during the Cold War. The U.S. intervention aimed to stabilize the situation and support the Lebanese government. American troops occupied key locations, including the port of Beirut and Beirut International Airport. The presence of U.S. forces helped to prevent the complete collapse of the Lebanese government and provided a semblance of stability. The crisis gradually de-escalated following negotiations and political maneuvers. President Chamoun agreed not to seek a second term, and General Fouad Kihab, who was perceived as a neutral and unifying figure, was elected as the new president. Kihab's presidency marked a period of relative stability, and attempts at political and social reforms. The U.S. forces withdrew from Lebanon by October 1958, having achieved their primary objective of stabilizing the country. However, the underlying issues of sectarian divisions and political instability persisted, setting the stage for future conflicts in Lebanon. The 1958 Lebanon crisis had several significant implications. It highlighted the fragility of Lebanon's political system, and the deep-seated sectarian divisions within the country. The crisis also underscored the broader geopolitical dynamics of the Cold War, with Lebanon becoming a battleground for competing influences between the United States and the Soviet Union. Moreover, the U.S. intervention in Lebanon set a precedent for future American involvement in the Middle East. It demonstrated the willingness of the United States to use military force to protect its interests and allies in the region, a policy that would be repeated in subsequent decades. In conclusion, the 1958 Lebanon crisis was a complex event driven by internal political and religious tensions and shaped by the broader geopolitical context of the Cold War. While the immediate crisis was resolved, the underlying issues remained, contributing to the ongoing challenges faced by Lebanon in maintaining stability and unity. In the next chapter, we will cover the revolution in Iraq, as well as the Second Taiwan Strait Crisis, the Berlin Crisis of 1958. and the Tibetan Uprising.